From the Kansas City Sports Update Studio, this is the Richard Smith Show, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs, brought to you by Arrowhead Update. Don't forget to check out our Royals Update podcast with Kevin Mong. Check us out on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Spreaker Player FM, YouTube, and all third-party applications. Also check us out on all major social media platforms. And if you can't find us there, just Google The Richard Smith Show and Kansas City Chiefs, and I promise you will find it. Let's talk Chiefs. How are we doing, Chiefs Kingdom? It is Friday, May 24th. And we have a lot of news to talk about tonight in Chiefs Kingdom. And tonight, for the first time, we have our senior senior NFL analyst, Kris Chavez, with us on the show. How are we doing tonight, Kris?
Doing pretty good. Yourself?
Oh, not bad, not bad. You ready to talk Chiefs?
Absolutely.
Great. You know, I love having you on the show tonight, man. It's been a long ride for us, and this is the first time I've got you on, and it's a pleasure. And tonight we're going to start off with talking about the NFL Draft coming to Kansas City here in 2022 or 2023. And with the economical value that the draft holds for Kansas City, you know, I kind of want to know your point of view as far as the draft coming to Kansas City and the significance that you think that it holds for the Chiefs and Chiefs Kingdom as well as the community.
Well, it certainly shows that the NFL values Kansas City and shows that we are an up-and-coming team. You look at the past drafts that have been outside of New York. You go with Chicago, Philly, Dallas, Nashville. These are big market teams that have a huge fan base, and is going to build nothing but excitement for the team, for the area. It's going to help to create jobs and bring an influx of money into the city. It's also going to have lasting effects. It's also going to showcase the tourist attractions that Kansas City and the nearby area provides that will have lasting implications as well. Absolutely. And then also, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off then. One other thing is that, as we've seen in the last two drafts, we also need to expect for our rivals to show up and try to rile us up.
Oh, absolutely. I love that driving home point there that you were saying. And you know, one thing I'll have to say about the draft, and you know, what we saw in Nashville is they brought home $224 million in revenue. And, you know, and that's just overall. That's not what the actual city brought in, but that is the overall value and standard of what the NFL draft means to a particular city. And honestly, I put Nashville and Kansas City sort of on the same level. There's a lot of tradition in Nashville. It's a music city. But as far as the heritage and where we come from, I feel like Kansas City and Nashville are on the same level. And so, you know, I look for Cleveland to do good here and then the next year or so. But I look for Kansas City to really thrive on this situation that we have at hand. The NFL draft is a huge deal. You know, one of the biggest things that the NFL showcases, and what better way to showcase that than to bring it to Kansas City and Chiefs Kingdom.
Absolutely.
So, you know, with that being said, you know, we talked about the significance in the draft and that such. And look, it's a huge deal for Kansas City, but a bigger deal is where our team lies right now. And so, you know, we have spoke a number of times, Kris, outside of this broadcast and our work. You know, we talk on a personal level. And when I speak with you, you always emphasize depth. So when it comes to depth, at what point do you think we are defensively when it comes to our depth situation at linebacker, cornerback, you know, every spot on the defensive side of the ball? What's your take on that?
I think we got tremendous depth this offseason at cornerback and safety, which was definitely an area of need. We definitely have some tremendous depth at defensive end. We brought in some guys in this offseason to help us out free agent-wise. But with our change from the 3-4 to the 4-3, we also have two guys who can return back to their natural positions at defensive end, and Tano Capasano and Breland Speaks, excuse me. Both of them will. Well, it depends on what value Spags has on them and where he sees them best fitting into his defense. But I think that those two moving down to defensive end would have the biggest impact for us there. With that said, I think that our biggest need as far as defense goes is still at linebacker. We still have. I mean, we've brought in some pieces, but we didn't bring in enough pieces to create the depth that we properly need there. And I think at linebacker, we're probably a year away from being at that point.
Fair enough, and you're absolutely right about that. But there's one point that I do want to make, is I do feel like that there's a lot of overlooked talent and players that we have in our depth chart right now in the linebacking core. And I don't necessarily want to say defensive end, because I'm with you on that one. We're kind of lacking switching up on our scheme. But the guy that we brought in from Cleveland, what do you know his name off the top of your head?
Ogba.
Yes. So he's one of those players who's just like I would say. The guy that we brought him from New England, you have to Alex Okafor. I feel like he can be on that level. He was just stuck in a bad system, just like the guy that we brought from what was that, Buffalo? I believe.
I think you're talking about the linebacker.
Yes, the linebacker from Buffalo, and I can't remember. But we're picking.
Darren Lee.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I think you were talking about Darren Lee.
Okay, yes. And then here's my thing is we're bringing in depth, but I agree with you is where are we at with it? Where does it lie as far as our starting linebacking core? What are we doing as far as schemes? Because, when we line up in nickel dime, all these schemes change. So I agree with you on that one. We're a year or so away from depth. What do you think as far as our defensive back core? Where are we at with that?
Oh, I really like who we brought in this offseason with our 6th-round pick. Although he wasn't my favorite pick of the entire draft, I think that he is a very complete player. It's just that his speed is lacking. He projects as probably at a top end throughout his career, possibly a nickel cornerback, but nothing more than that. But with one of our first undrafted free agents that we brought in, Mark Fields, he potentially could end up developing into a number 2 cornerback long term. I think he has a much bigger upside. We brought in some really great talent there. Safety with Thornhill.
Yes.
I mean, dude's going to be an absolute beast for us.
He is, and you're right about that, because if you break down the tape, and that's my thing, is that's what I want to break down to the fans, is when we bring in these players and we bring in their system players, when we bring them in, if you watch the film on them and you watch the highlight videos, you'll see that these players like Juan Thornhill and Braylon Speaks, if you watch his college videos too, but even Alex Okafor, the Hammer, Clark. You watch all those highlight videos; they're all over the field. They have endless motors, and I think that's what Brett Veach is really trying to emphasize on bringing into Kansas City is youth and motors. Because when you have a quarterback like Mahomes, and I know you're well aware of this, but when you have a quarterback like Mahomes who's driving up and down the field, at any given time, I mean, you can have a 10-second 90-yard drive, and the defense is right back on the field. So we need those motors, and I think those are extremely important. But it's like, I feel like we have names that are coming in and Chiefs Kingdom we're not aware of. But if we just do a little research, we might see the depth that we truly have. But you're still right about all that. We are still a year away, but, and I'm sure you agree with this, with Spags coming in, he just had to get a little bit better on defense, a little bit better. So where do you think we are with that in the scenario?
Well, going back to something that you just brought up, we definitely need to bring up speed, and we definitely hit that point. We brought in a ton of speed at linebacker, in the secondary. And these guys are going to be tremendous for us. Darren Lee tested out at, I want to say it was a 4.42 in the 40 at the combine.
Wow.
And, I mean, the dude flies. And that's who we have at linebacker. And making the move to the 4-3, that's what we need.
And I love that too. Not to cut you off, but I want to say something about Darren Lee. Is what I said in the last broadcast, and I want to bring this up with you on the show. Is you agreed with me that Darren Lee was a low risk, high reward type of player who we got for a 6th-round pick, who was a former 1st-round pick 3 years ago. What's your take on that?
It was an absolute steal, and I think that he was just in a very bad, let me jump back, an extremely bad franchise.
Yes.
And I think that if he comes into the right system, and he's going to be around tremendous players on this defense. Yeah. And he's going to be able to thrive in this defense if he puts forth the work and effort that got him drafted number 1 overall, or in the 1st round overall.
Right, and then I agree with you on that, and I think in the system that he's in, look, in Andy Reid's system, and you know this like I do, is it's next man up. If he doesn't produce, I mean, he's out of here. So he's really he's in the best position that he could be and the worst position that he could be. It's really it's like a win or go home scenario, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, very much so. And with Veach having shown that he's not willing, or he's very willing to let guys go and bring in guys off the street and give them a chance, those guys will come in and they will put forth an effort that a lot of the old regime had brought in who weren't putting forth that effort.
Right. And you know, here's another point to drive home. You know, who we're talking about here is this man. We're talking about a guy who was ranked 4th overall last year in passing defense. 4th overall in linebackers. That's a big deal.
Yep. And he's going to be able to affect throws to tight ends, out in the flat to the running backs with that speed. And I think that's one thing that definitely hurt us last year was the short passing game.
Right, absolutely. So then we look at that. We look at this one player that we've narrowed in on, who's really kind of, the last piece that we've kind of brought into Kansas City. But just that one piece that Kansas City probably wouldn't narrow in on were finding key pieces of why Brett Veach is bringing them here, and already we know how he's going to contribute to a defense that just need to categorically get just a fraction better.
Yeah, and we already had a couple of really nice pieces coming over from last year with Hitchens and Dorian O'Daniel. I think both of them, Hitchens going back to the system in which he thrived in back in Dallas in the 4-3.
Right.
And then Dorian O'Daniel being able to have another year's worth of experience. And I think that potentially O'Daniel could end up being the starter by the end of the season.
I agree. And really, Speaks can have a big year too if he really, narrows down and focuses, because he's a fast linebacker who's runs around, who's all over the field. But I think the thing I like about what's going on right now with all the question marks we have is I don't think that one thing we're not lacking is competition at the starting position, and I really like that scenario.
Yeah, no, I think starting lineup-wise, I think whoever we put in there it's going to be based upon the matchups that we have to look at. And, I mean, like you're going up against week 1, we have Jacksonville, and they're going to be a run-heavy offense. We have to be able to stop the run. And so we have to have some thumpers at linebacker who can play downhill and hit those linebackers and put Fournette on his ass. Whereas later on in the season, when we play New England, we can't play with those thumpers. We have to have versatile linebackers. And having the depth that we have, or the players that we have, they'll allow us to make some changes, subtle changes, that will allow us to defend them properly.
Yes, and I completely agree. And to drive home that point a little more, with how aggressive Brett Veach is, there's no way in my mind that if there's a scenario that pops up midway in the season where we can pick up a solid defensive player on waivers, we're all over that. And look, it's happened in the past. I mean, let's look at a way outside the box thing here. Who's the guy from Seattle that broke his leg last year that we were really all over? Earl Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if Earl Thomas comes back and has this huge, great comeback in mid-season? He's ready to roll, fresh legs. He's good to go, and we can pick him up cheap.
Well, the problem with that is that he signed with Baltimore.
Earl Thomas did?
But, yeah.
Oh, my. That's something
Yeah.
I looked over.
Yeah, no, they were actually trying to get him to come to Kansas City and team up with Honey Badger,
Right.
and those two would have been our two safeties.
Fair enough. Okay.
But
And
he ended up signing with Baltimore.
And that's why Kris Chavez is our senior NFL analyst, because there's a lot of news out there, and sometimes that news gets overlooked for sure. But, okay, I'm going to touch base on one thing real quick. This is outside the box, and I just want to know your take on it. To me, it's a laughing question now, but it's worth talking about. Patrick Peterson. What's your take on Patrick coming to the Kansas City Chiefs?
Oh, man. Okay, so while I would love to have a player of his ability, his leadership, and as well as pair him back up with Matthew, by the time that he is done with his suspension and he's back to playing form, we're going to be well beyond halfway through the season. And it might even be after the trade deadline that he's available to even be traded. I don't know if you can trade a suspended player.
Very true.
And so any dreams of Peterson might have to be put off until the following year.
And that makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think about that. Wow, very, very, very good point. Okay, so while we're talking about the future of Kansas City, I really believe that Peterson is not involved in that. But, Kris, you have a GM mindset. What would be your next move with the franchise if right now Kris Chavez was the general manager of the Kansas City Chiefs?
So there's actually kind of two things that I have to kind of look at. I have to look at my roster and analyze where I have tremendous depth and where I have a lot, not necessarily a lot of holes, but where I could improve.
Correct.
And any roster can be improved.
Now, immediate improvement or long term?
I would say long term. Because again, looking at the matchup type players that we need to bring in at linebacker, looking at tight end, possibly, definitely for future. Those would be the two positions that I would look at the most as far as bringing in somebody to contribute immediately, or I'd trade some of that tremendous depth that we have for future draft picks, because as Brett Veach has shown us the last two drafts, the boy can draft, and he can bring in talent all the way down to the 6th and 7th round.
Absolutely.
But the other thing that I would then say is, okay, so maybe I'm very happy with the roster and how it's all put together. My next thing that I then do is I start using my cap space that I have, and I start signing our future core players who are going to be the guys that I want to keep to build our dynasty.
Yes, and
for the next several years.
And we're sitting around $20 million in cap space right now. Once the Eric Berry deal clears up,
it'll actually be $24 million, because we're at 15 right now, and Eric Berry is going to count, or is currently counting 9 against that.
Okay.
Or we'll add nine more million to that.
Okay, so one thing that I really want to hone in on, and I think that Kansas City has really overlooked this as far as our future. And I hope I'm not cutting you off here. As far as our future with the Chiefs, is we have focused in primarily on the $200 million contract that Patrick Mahomes is obviously worthy of and guaranteed to get. We're not going to let that man walk. But then also, we've got a man in Tyreek Hill that we also need to pay. We have a guy in Chris Jones who we need to pay. And then when Mahomes and Hill's rookie contracts are up, not only do we need to pay both of them and Chris Jones, people forget that Travis Kelce's contract is coming back up. So I feel like we're at a point where every single move, no matter what, is so critical right at this point that I feel like going out and making a desperate move, signing a player to a one-year deal like Sue, is really a stretch for us and would set us back more than it would really benefit us, because our future, I mean, we've got some players that are going to take some serious money out of our salary cap, and how are we going to navigate that? That would be my big. If you were the man with the keys to the Ferrari, Kris, how would you navigate that?
So in that regard, you have to look at, they're still on their rookie contracts, and so they're still playing for us rather cheaply.
Correct.
And the cap space doesn't roll over to next year, as much as I would love for it to. And I think every Chiefs fan would love to have an additional $24 million going into next year when we have to sign these guys. But we're also in a win now mode.
Absolutely.
And if you've got $24 million to play with to make a run at a Super Bowl, and there's guys out there in the free agent market that you could bring in to make your team better, you kind of have to make that move. Unless you're happy with the guys that you have on your roster currently.
I agree.
And having looked at the free agents available, other than one or two guys that we could bring in, and it would strictly be at a rotational basis. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be as a starter position or the three-down position. I really don't see anybody else out there that we could bring in.
And you're right about that, but I'm going to say this, and I stand by this firmly, and I'm kind of jumping the gun a little bit. And I'm going to say this about two different players. My first gut, I wanted your take on Sammy Watkins, but I'm going to touch base on that right now. No matter what happens with Sammy Watkins in the next season, if he has a breakout season or he has another subpar season. And here's my thing with Sammy Watkins. You've seen all of the posts about him, turning a leaf and him really, really taking charge of his role with the Chiefs and being a team player and really guiding the younger players. But here's my thing. No matter how he does, we're at a point with our salary cap, with Brett Veach, with our team, when we brought in McCole Hartman, this is basically, he is stock for us. Now, with that being said, he's trade bait for next year. I also look for that with Chris Jones. Chris Jones is absolutely replaceable in my mind, and I feel like with what we were talking about before with Mahomes and Hill and Kelce and Chris Jones, we have to utilize the franchise tag, 3 years in a row to keep our core. But I think that Watkins and Chris Jones will be the first out the door in my mind.
I definitely agree with you on Watkins. I think that he's going to definitely be gone after this season. Definitely going to be trade bait one way or the other. Hopefully he has an amazing season so that we can, and a healthy season, so that he'll be more value to trade or the teams that want him. The one that I think is going to be a harder sell will be trading Chris Jones. Not that people aren't going to want him. He's going to be in high demand. But trading him would be like trading Dontari Poe, except for the fact that Jones hasn't had any injury issues.
True.
Poe did. And if you look at what Poe did when he went to Atlanta, we got rid of him at the right time.
Absolutely.
He did nothing. He did nothing in Atlanta. Chris Jones is still improving every single year.
I agree.
And I think, especially for our defensive line, he is the building block for that defensive line. You look at everybody else, and I'm not discrediting Frank Clark, but we haven't seen how those two beasts play together. And I'm really excited to see how they perform together, because if those two guys can play together for the next 5 years, we could have the return of Sack City.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, now that you bring that point up, it could be a tandem like, and no disrespect to Chiefs Kingdom or Derek Thomas, but it could be a tandem like Neil Smith and Derek Thomas. We never know.
Absolutely.
So, and I guess in respect to that, you know, I'm going to float off of what you say there, and I kind of have to agree and, you know, put my foot in my mouth a little bit. But, you know, in the same regards, when it comes to the salary cap, we're at a point where, you know, we're tossing things up in the air and looking at ideas of how, you know, the future of, you know, the Kansas City Chiefs organization is going to look, because we're at a point where we don't really have to be offense heavy anymore, because we have a quarterback who will make receivers. So if we improve our defense, like you say, and we do our best to keep our core players, if we keep Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey, and then we stack our defense, I mean, we are on a dynasty run with Hartman on a rookie deal as well. I mean, it's really looking amazing. And let's shift gears to the offense a little bit, and let me ask you what you think on the offensive side as far as depth and where we're at, and what you think, you know, we should be this year.
I definitely think that we brought in some really great wide receivers this year, again, through the draft and through the draft free agency. We've got some great running backs, and our offensive line is good as well. What we still need to bring in, though, is a good end to complement and eventually take the reins from Kelsey and take over. Not that we're trying to push him out the door, but we need to start preparing for when Kelsey does leave.
Correct.
Hopefully through retirement.
Hopefully from what? I'm sorry, it kind of broke up a little bit. I don't know if you're talking into your microphone a little close or not.
Sorry. From retirement. Because Kelsey's no spring chicken. He's kind of getting up there in age now.
Absolutely. But do remember one thing about Kelsey is, I know that he's 29 going into 30 years old right now, but he's only been in the league 5 years. So normally a player will come into the league at 22 years old, when Kelsey came in the league at 25. So with that being said, I understand the age thing, but as far as the range of how long he's actually played in the NFL, you know, I feel like he'll have a few more years in him than the average player, because he spent 4 years in Cincinnati and really went into Cincinnati a little later. Because I believe he went to a prep school or something like that before Cincinnati.
Yeah. Well, we also, up until this past year, we've seen every single year he's had wear and tear on his body.
Very true.
And this year was the first year where he didn't have a significant injury. He missed some time, but nothing major this year. And hopefully he can put together some more years like that. But for whatever reason, I think whatever wear and tear he's had on his body is going to catch up with him here pretty soon.
And I have to agree with you on that. And you know, he just had off-season surgery on his ankle, which wasn't a huge deal, and he's obviously, you know, out of his cast and things. It was just an air cast. So like I said before, I really think that the surgery that he had was just something to correct an issue of discomfort. But you're right. There comes a point in time where you have to look into the future. But that's really what I like about Brett Veach is, you know, I mean, we didn't really waste that's the Chiefs organization. I want to say Brett Veach because it really didn't have anything to do with him. But at one point in time, our organization has made it a focal point to have a star tight end, and it's really helped and projected in our franchise. So with that being said, yeah, it's time to look for some depth, and I hope we pick somebody up in the draft deep this year or in an unrestricted free agent, didn't we?
Yeah, we signed an undrafted free agent. He's a wide receiver who's going to be converting to tight end. And then we also brought in a quarterback, I want to say from Princeton.
Yes, it was Princeton.
Who's going to be kind of like I won't say a wildcat, but he is kind of a jack of all trades sort of athlete who we can line up anywhere.
So, and I really like that, and you brought that, and that was one thing I brought up in the last show that and I made a point to let people know that was really your analysis. You're the one who really dug up that information. But yes, it is a quarterback from Princeton who does line up in every position and is a home run hitter and really a huge utility player. And Andy Reid is hot about this guy, and so and I hope that this continues, because if we have another guy like that with McCole Hartman plus the running back we got deep in the draft, I can't remember what his name is, the more or less
Warren Thompson?
Yes. And he's like a Darren Sproles type of running back. But look, if we have all three of those rotating in our offense, those players, I mean, they're home run hitters, and Reed is great at exploiting that type of talent and really bringing it to the table. So with the depth in our draft, as far as Hartman, the running back that you just mentioned, and the Princeton quarterback, where do you think we stand with that? You think they'll make their way into the starting rotation, or at least special teams?
Special teams, definitely. You can't leave that kind of speed off of the field. And Reed will find a way to give these speedy guys a chance to show what they can do.
Absolutely.
And I think that by the end of the season, we definitely see Thompson getting some significant touches, and the quarterback athlete guy, we'll definitely see him getting some snaps and definitely mixing it up. Kind of lining up all over the place, whether it be wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, running back. You can see him all over the field.
Good deal. And that's the thing is, we're really utilizing every bit of talent that we bring in the draft through trades, through free agency, and Brett Veach and Andy Reid are masterminds of that, and really Clark Hunt is at the helm, and it's just really nice to see, from top to bottom, everything lining up the way it should. And with that being said, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. We're running out of time here. Anthony Hitchens, your take on him, is this a make or break season for Hitchens? Because there was a lot of hype with him coming in from Dallas, because he was an impact player in Dallas, and I know that he came into a different system, under who was our defensive coordinator's name last year? I can't remember his name now.
I don't want to remember his name.
Well, he came under his system. Now he's in Atlanta, and good riddance. But he came into his system, and he really didn't do much. So do you think this is a breakout season for Anthony Hitchens? Because really, as far as my spotlight on offense and defense, we've touched base on Sammy Watkins, but Anthony Hitchens is really my spotlight player on the defense of make or break season. What do you think?
No, I absolutely agree. The talent that he has around him, he could absolutely thrive in this defense as well. He's going to be going back to the same system that he was in Dallas, and he should be able to attack the running at the middle.
Yeah, I agree that, and that's one thing that we need is somebody who will attack the running game up the middle, and he did. In Dallas, he really owned the running game, and he was a hard-hitting player all over the field. So I guess I'm with you on that one. I feel like he's going to complement the rest of the defense as long as they play well. Like you said, he will play well. So my last question for you tonight before I let you go and let you enjoy your Saturday evening and let Chiefs Kingdom enjoy their weekend is, and this is the $1 million question right here. Do you think Mahomes will match his numbers of 50 touchdowns and throwing for 5,000 yards, will he match those numbers in this coming up season?
Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit of a haircut. I think that Mahomes is going to have a better year than last year as far as his own personal performance, but I don't think that he puts up the same numbers.
Okay, so with that being said, would you say that more or less he'll carry us further into the season and have not as good as statistics? Like, say, we'll win the Super Bowl, but he won't have 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards.
And I've kind of heard him talking about the OTA, and he's trying to play smarter and not necessarily always go for the home run ball, but looking at the easier throw that's still going to get the first down as opposed to going 40, 50 yards downfield.
And which, in a way I like that because, our yards after reception for the Chiefs is really through the roof. And in the same respect, that's going to preserve him long term.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And I'm with you on that, but I still love the, 50, 60-yard passes through the air on fourth down against Baltimore where Tyreek Hill catches the ball and, carries us on to a victory when realistically that should have been a loss in the books.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that, and maybe it's not this year, but here in one of the next very, very few or very near years, I definitely think that Mahomes is going to be the first quarterback to ever do the 50 touchdowns, 5,000 yards twice.
Ooh, and I love that, and I absolutely agree with that. And how could you argue after a first season like that? I mean, that's one of those things that every other quarterback in NFL history that has achieved that accomplishment has been a progressive thing and accomplished it later in his career. Mahomes accomplished that year one as a starter, and that is absolutely insane.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't think the NFL has ever seen somebody like Mahomes to step in and make it like that.
Say that one more time.
I don't think that the NFL has ever seen somebody who can step in and for the first year play to that level at quarterback.
Yeah, and that's obviously MVP status, and he obviously reached that status as well as the Madden cover, as well as the Pro Bowl MVP, Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, so many awards from last year that really just stick out in your mind to show you, what the future is for the Kansas City Chiefs and here in Chiefs Kingdom. And so, Kris, hey, it was awesome having you on the show tonight, man. I really, really appreciate it. Your input and your analysis is second to none, and you're welcome on here anytime. This is our senior NFL analyst, Kris Chavez, with us tonight. Thank you for being with us, man. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me, man. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Well, Kansas City, I appreciate you being with us here on the broadcast tonight. Like I said, that is Kris Chavez, our senior NFL analyst, with us tonight. There was a lot of Chiefs news. We covered a lot tonight. This is a great show. I really, really appreciate Kris's input. And Kansas City, this is just the beginning. The next week, Kansas City, I want to bring a point to this. The next 7 days, I'm going to do Ask a Fan. So I will have a different fan on every single night of the broadcast and ask them their analysis on the Chiefs' future and what is in store for the next season. Look, Kansas City, have a great weekend. This is the Richard Smith Show, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs. We're here at the KCSU studios, brought to you by Arrowhead Update. Check us out on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Player FM, YouTube, and all third-party applications. Also, check us out on all major social media platforms. And if you cannot find us there, just Google The Richard Smith Show and Kansas City Chiefs, and I promise you will find us. Have a great night, Kansas City.